You're listening to Interchain FM, the Cosmos radio station. If you're seeking alpha in the cosmos, look no further. I'm your host, Chango Unchained. I'm here with Magnus and Barry from Skip Protocol. Well, rather, not Skip anymore. It got merged into the ICF itself. What do you guys call yourselves? The ICF cosmonauts?
ICL. Interchain
Labs.
Labs. ICL.
ICL, Interchain Labs. Okay. I actually thought it was Interchain Lads. That'd be pretty cool.
Well, hopefully not just lads anymore.
Yes, hopefully not that exclusionary.
So welcome back to the show. We've done an episode with Skip in the past. You should listen to that if you're not familiar. That should be a good primer. And that was done at Cosmoverse. It was like the second ever Cosmoverse. Was it? That was in Medellin, Colombia. Yep. So that was back in 2022, I believe. A while ago. Catch us up to the latest progress on the ICF/Skip. And how do you reconcile the two different priorities, or is it now just one same priority under one umbrella?
It's a great question. I can give some of the history and some of the sort of how we think about priorities now. Skip got started, I think, and when you last interviewed us, we were really focused on MEV and this idea of helping app chains recapture their own MEV. And the reason that we were so focused on that was it was one of the things that stood out to us as really uniquely possible and really uniquely programmable in Cosmos and with the app chain architecture, where you can control your own sequencing, you can build your own blocks. So that can be a new source of revenue for applications that they're giving up to their L1 if they're not built as an app chain. So kind of working on that, we learned two things. I think the really important one was we got much more convinced that, okay, app chains are the right way to build, world scale decentralized applications, and that the architecture is the one that we want to bet our company on, bet our careers on, bet everything on, and really try to bring into the world and support. And the second thing we learned is that there were kind of bigger problems that the Cosmos ecosystem and app chains had at that time, especially in terms of accessing users and liquidity and capital. So we started putting a lot of our efforts actually away from MEV, which is more about how do I make money from my app chain, and more to helping app chains scale by having better access to users and capital. So we built a product called Skip Go, which is an onboarding platform for Cosmos chains. It makes it really, really easy for people to build front ends or wallets or onboarding pages or these kinds of things, where you have a user who has some token on a different chain and they want to bring it to your chain, and you want to bring them to your token. So it does a bunch of DEX and bridge aggregation. It's expanded to including intents and things. And through that, we basically made IBC much easier to use. So every Cosmos wallet you've probably ever used, Kepler, Leap, all the MetaMask, Snap stuff, all of it uses Skip Go, that platform under the hood. And almost every onboarding page, almost every cross-chain swapping page in Cosmos uses it under the hood. So it actually now is doing more than 50% of all IBC transactions are going through Skip Go. And it made it much, much easier to access Cosmos as well. So through things like, we sort of connected things like Noble and CCTP and Hyperlane, all these other things. So now onboarding from Ethereum is very, very cheap and only takes seconds instead of 15 minutes, which is the old paradigm. So it's made Cosmos a lot more accessible, and it's made it a lot more usable internally. And at the same time, though, I think we always felt like we were just sort of chipping away still at the edges of the problems. We had tried to increase accessibility, but there was so much more that we could do, and so much that we saw we could do if we could, work on the stack and work on the Cosmos Hub and Atom, right? Like as a really central part of the ecosystem. And we started talking to the ICF about those things a few months ago, because we were just thinking, okay, if this ecosystem doesn't go the way that we need it to, we might have to build a whole new ecosystem from scratch that works backwards from what we were doing really well at the time, which was deliver incredible multi-chain user experiences. And the ICF, which I think everybody has this impression that in the past they didn't care or whatever. They were actually, that sounds incredible. And we would love to work with you guys on that. And so we always kind of had a similar mission. They had access to a lot of resources, right? In terms of kind of the ICF treasury and sort of the brand recognition and the Cosmos Hub and working there. And we had a lot of great relationships with chains. It's a proven experience building these great multi-chain user experiences and growing Cosmos from the ground up. And we realized, oh, we can do a lot more if we do it together.
Yes, that's fantastic. It was actually super bullish news to hear that, it's kind of like the notion of lead, follow, or get out of the way. And, it's best when competent people lead, and then the ones who are kind of, I don't know, residual in the what do you call it, the leadership stack, is following or getting out of the way. So it was really bullish to hear that that you guys have come on board, new blood, new energy, doing this stuff and pushing the Cosmos stack forward, which I'm very optimistic about. So thank goodness you guys are at the helm. It does sound like there's a lot going on, and when you were talking about the inadequacies of the original Cosmos stack, or let's just call it the legacy Cosmos stack, it kind of reminded me about the same grievances that project, like the new projects that are building their ecosystems from scratch, like Initia, who were Cosmos native, would look at this and say, I could build something better and from scratch without all the legacy technical debt. You guys have come in from a different angle. What areas of the ICF are you guys improving now?
The ICF was basically set up, a little bit of its history was it was set up out of the Atom ICO and funded by that. And its purpose was to accelerate the software and technology stack and vision of the interchain, or the Internet of Blockchains. And its relationship with the Cosmos Hub was, I think, confusing, right? I think a lot of folks expected that it would be the foundation for Atom because of its funding structure. And for a long time, the ICF did not believe that it was the foundation for Atom or for the Cosmos Hub specifically.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but as someone who worked on Cosmos when all of this was under the same entity,
Yeah,
that was actually the internal dialogue. Like, those were the expectations when the ICF broke off, and so that those were the original promises of leadership that moved into the ICF to say, oh, we're actually going to be the stewards. And that's why all the official comms assets and everything else, including the IP, were transferred from All in Bits to the ICF. So it's just a little strange to me for this notion of skirting responsibility when things got difficult.
Well,
Anyway,
that's sort of exactly to my point, which is our vision for the ICF is not to skirt that responsibility, right? And is to embrace that responsibility much more deeply and internalize that across all of our functions, right? So we care deeply about the Cosmos Hub, not for the sake of it being a Cosmos Hub or the Cosmos Hub today, but because Atom is pivotal to the success of the ecosystem. And the Cosmos Hub in particular is pivotal to the success of the ecosystem, meaning that they act as canaries that is the coal mine of Cosmos, right? Meaning when Atom is successful and when the Cosmos Hub is successful, it seems to be that the entire Cosmos ecosystem becomes more successful. And the reverse is also very, very strongly true. And so we've made our own commitment to building out, firstly, an internal hub team that is dedicated to building the Cosmos Hub that I'm very involved in. And we also have Gnome, who is a longtime hub aficionado. And we believe that driving these things in unity, the Cosmos Hub with the development of the entire tech stack, Comet, the SDK, IBC, will lead to a much more cohesive product offering. And the reality is the ICF, right, and ICL are sort of redefining what Cosmos is, right? Cosmos used to be anything built with the Cosmos tech stack and maybe anything connected over IBC. That isn't what Cosmos is to us in terms of the Cosmos we care about. The Cosmos we care about is, yes, things that use those pieces of software, but also have a relationship with the core of Cosmos, which is the Cosmos Hub, right? And that relationship can be in many forms. right? The relationship could be monetary, meaning the application, let's say, purchases Atom or uses Atom in some way. It could be a product relationship where they use the hub for one of the services that we're building on top of it, or that it's built directly on the hub. But this is the way that we actually can have an economic model come out of Cosmos that people can understand, and that is self-reinforcing, where value created in Cosmos drives the value of the overall picture and the core foundation and Atom and the Cosmos Hub, and that is a much more understandable story for your everyday investor.
I like that with the current leadership team, the thinking is both touching on the technical and the pragmatic in the business sense. The legacy Cosmos vision was very much, hey, we need permissionless building so that we don't necessarily need to build in any self-reinforcing economic cross-pollination, so to speak. But now I think, that is very much needed, because we did find that over time there was difficulty in incentivizing people who used our stack to co-brand and help bolster the Cosmos ecosystem, the technical coattails on top of which they've kind of sort of free-ridden. A lot of chains like crypto.com, like Polygon. I definitely appreciate that. What are the sorts of services that are getting introduced to the Cosmos Hub?
That's a great question. There's a ton of stuff happening that we can't really talk about in too much detail yet, but we can cover the high level, which is sort of as Mag was saying, like, we are no longer really thinking about Cosmos as a collection of these different technologies that are for a bunch of different things and, all this stuff. Like, we're going to be very open source driven, but we're starting to think about it more as a cohesive developer platform for building, world scale decentralized applications. And this is kind of what it was always meant to be. But yeah, as you said in the previous sort of leadership, and when sort of things left that one org where everything was focused, everybody went off and went in their own direction. There was much less focus. And what we're finding is, if you really want to be the place where people can build these world scale apps, they're not just going to show up. Building an app chain in particular is really, really hard, right? There's a ton of stuff that goes into that we've seen that's extremely expensive, extremely time consuming. Things like actually figuring out, okay, what's your exchange and custodian story? How do you get them to integrate with you? What about on ramps and off ramps? How do you get them to integrate with you? Oracles, bridges, generally places where users and liquidity come from and can access you. And if you want to be focused on one thing, right, then you also need access to a bunch of other primitives, dexes, lending markets, leverage, payments, things like this. And in theory, right, the stuff to make that possible today exists in Cosmos. It's IBC. All of those things can be delivered over IBC, but it's actually really hard to do. And it's not being done right now. And a big part of what we want the hub to become is the infrastructure provider for people who are building real app chains, right? Things like Akash or Allura, which is a new, decentralized AI inference network, or we're talking to a new team called D3 that's working on domain tokenization, right? These things where they really want to do one thing, and there's all this extra stuff that's extremely complex from an infrastructure perspective in Cosmos. Like, okay, I have to run 100 IBC relayers. Like, what the hell is that, right? And our belief is that they should be able to get all of this stuff the way they would from their L1 over IBC from the Cosmos Hub. And we're working with a ton of teams now to make that possible. Vendors who want to support Cosmos, but who don't know how to support every chain as a standalone chain, are starting to actually look at the hub as a hub. Say, okay, if I support here, then we can build things out around it that mean that, okay, I can have my custodians and exchanges and on-ramps and all these things feel like they're native on all of these chains that are just connected to the hub. So that's kind of what we want to do. We want it to be like, you can build your app, you can connect to the hub, and then you can have all of the incredible benefits of being on a supercharged L1. And then in addition to that, and Mag can get into this side, on the hub itself, you should be able to build an application that interacts with or aggregates over and uses all of these incredible app chains that are going to be connected to the hub and not just in Cosmos, right? But everywhere.
Well, I want to elaborate on something that you briefly alluded to, which is the problem of qualified custodians right now, which is kind of like this like sleeper problem that not a whole lot of people understand. But they need to understand, because of the regulatory framework that was introduced in February 2023 by Gensler, is that it's this kind of like soft requirement of getting funds and institutions where the large percentage of the liquidity comes from can only be unlocked through qualified custodians. That's the thing, right? Like, market makers are not going to market make your token. Like, funds are not going to be able to access your tokens unless you are integrated by a custodian. And the problem with that is, so it's kind of like twofold, right? So Adam is supposed to be the one paving the way to unlocking these integrations from the institutions, and the foundation has the capital to do so, because they all, like, most of them ask just for money in order to integrate. Secondarily, it's more of a like a technical hurdle, in the sense that not every Cosmos app chain is standardized such that if a qualified custodian integrates the Cosmos Hub, that necessarily allows them to like seamlessly integrate another app chain that has a similar token standard, the same way that they would be able to do so for any ERC20 or like SPL20. I think that's like the Solana token standard. Are we addressing that?
Yes. The short answer is yes.
Amazing. How?
So, I mean, if you think about the scale required to support multiple ERC20 tokens, even if you're not a qualified custodian, or let's say you're an exchange or a market maker, the lift is essentially zero, because it is the same contract interface that you can essentially rinse and repeat all your integrations for. Immediately, the hurdle to support all of those tokens in the Ethereum ecosystem, and the same thing applies to the tokens on Solana and all the meme coins on Solana, that lift is zero, right? And so all that remains is an argument about the fundamentals of the token. And as we know, like, those arguments have a very low bar, as we see a lot of things get listed that are, don't have true fundamentals. And so it really is the case in Cosmos that it's the lift, right? It's the technical lift. And if you think about, well, if a custodian was to support every single Cosmos token today, they would need to run at a minimum 120 nodes. Probably for redundancy, they would need to run an additional 120, so a total of around 250 nodes. Each node costing about $300 a month. You start to get into the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands a year in terms of just support, because they have to integrate with each of these blockchains, right? And for each one they do, they only get one token out of it. The way to change this is to change the kind of scaling factor of supporting multiple tokens with one integration. And one of the things that we think the hub can be useful for in this regard is if all these custodians and centralized exchanges are connected to the Cosmos Hub directly, we would be able to offer any other IBC issued assets, let's say through Token Factory or IBC bridged assets, also to those custodians via their existing integration, right? So you can imagine we could, for example, support Initia. If Initia were to bridge the tokens that the custodians needed to the Cosmos Hub, and then they would be natively accessible on the Cosmos Hub and using the Cosmos Hub security. This could apply to anything, right? Because ultimately these tokens could be unwound and sent back to their original destination if necessary. That's really an attractive proposition, right? Because that immediately rescales the technical burden for the integrators down to essentially like O of 1, right? Versus O of n. And I think there's some challenges that we need to overcome to make that happen. One of the first things is staking. So if we were to bridge a lot of these tokens to the Cosmos Hub, it would be difficult to stake them on their native chains, which is usually the highest form of yield for that token, and would be difficult to replicate on the Cosmos Hub. This could be solved with liquid staking, potentially, where if custodians used liquid staked versions of the tokens, there would be staking, or automatic compounding or rebalancing available for those tokens at the staking yield rate. Potentially there could be a product there of sort of like remote staking or using these tokens as additional native staking tokens on the Cosmos Hub.
What would be the incentive for, I would call Initia an external ecosystem project, or Celestia as well, but they're definitely running in parallel, or there's a lot of overlap with Cosmos, obviously. what would be the incentive for them to do it this way instead of attempt to revert it such that they offer the same services and try to get, staked Atom on Initia or Celestia and get the institutions to onboard that way?
It's a great question. The first real thing that we're finding is like for these custodians and for exchanges and bridges and everybody wants to be able to say, okay, I support the Cosmos ecosystem, I support the IBC network, I support it permissionlessly as it grows and expands, basically, and I can add new chains or new tokens super, super easily. And it's not as simple, like to really give them that experience, right? You have to really focus on, you have to build a whole product suite around it for these kinds of platforms. Like if this is going to work, then it can't just be like, okay, cool, now a custodian on the hub actually supports your token. It has to be that you, as Mag said, you can stake it natively on the other chain. It feels like you didn't even bridge it to the hub. You don't even realize that. And that requires building out infrastructure around that. It requires being able to say, okay, hey, this is going to now be a central point in the IBC network as well. So we have to think about how do we have ultra fast relaying, ultra reliable relaying, censorship resistant relaying? How do we actually connect into solver protocols to make sure that, okay, as we expand to Ethereum and other chains that finalize more slowly, right? Like we can always access liquidity across the different L2s and things like that. So there's a whole stack of infrastructure that you have to build out around it. And a lot of sort of next generation IBC functionality too, that's not at all trivial to build. Like we need cross-chain accounts and cross-chain queries and these kinds of things to really just work. And that's not the business that a lot of these other chains are in, right? Celestia's business is DA. Initia has their own ecosystem that they're trying to do these kinds of things for. And we have really good relationships with a lot of these teams and others. The other big thing is all of that's doubly true for people who are building, real app chains as opposed to trying to build their own ecosystems. And there's a lot of those folks.
The work that you're doing now is pioneering the work that the ETH modular ecosystem is going to have to do in a couple of years from now. If we basically unlock this and be able to capture and finally like monetize for the Cosmos ecosystem, right? Because like we have this bad history of pioneering a lot of these things and then not capturing the value from all of the research and legwork that we did that gets captured in other ecosystems. So hopefully we stop doing that.
There's this group of sort of like estranged chains that are built entirely using Cosmos software and basically are on, Cosmos Twitter and in Cosmos communities are supported by, the things that we build and the products that we build that for whatever reason do not want to be associated with Cosmos. It's a very confusing situation. And I think my current thesis about this is that it doesn't, they believe that it does not serve them to be associated with Cosmos, right?
Yeah.
That it somehow perhaps limits the growth potential of their community or their token valuation, right? I generally think this is extremely short-sighted thinking and does not help the overall brand of themselves or of Cosmos. I think it's actually net negative. There's no downside to being part of an ecosystem, right? And there's no downside to having an ecosystem within an ecosystem. If these chains were to, reinvest in the Cosmos brand and sort of not try to like hide what their underlying tech stack is, I think one, it's much more authentic, and two, we can make the Cosmos brand something a lot more exciting. I think it's hard to be the first one to do that. It takes a couple to do it at the same time. But already, I think we're seeing some thawing on that rigidity, right? I think we're seeing a lot of these folks come out and support the acquisition. We're seeing a lot of folks more interested in adding Atom in different places in their protocols, because I think these folks understand at the end of the day, they are building a tech stack that is essentially funded by the Atom ICO. That is important to remember. And I think we as a foundation are a lot more business savvy about supporting the customers that do have a relationship with us and deprioritizing the ones that don't, right? Which ultimately will benefit their product if they have a relationship with us and with the Cosmos Hub. We're trying to find really great ways to provide that relationship in the form of a service that we can give them, which is some of these ideas around IBC compatibility.
One other thing I wanted to add to your question of like, yeah, in the past we've seen things happen and we haven't monetized them, and Ethereum is probably going to have the same problem. One of the things that I think is really important that's going to happen is this new version of IBC allows us to connect as well to Ethereum and Optimism and all the super chains and all the Arbitrum L3s as we can Cosmos chains, which is going to completely change like what the Cosmos Hub is. Like we're going to very quickly accelerate from like the Cosmos Hub isn't doing anything, like through the Cosmos Hub as a hub for Cosmos to the Cosmos Hub as a hub for crypto generally. And
the
like
interchain.
because this right, like the real interchain, and because the standard is IBC that we're going to be delivering all these services over, and because we can expand it permissionlessly and it can connect to all these places, the actual market that we're going to be able to access is the scale of crypto. It's not the scale of just Cosmos, and it sort of changes how you think about the Cosmos use. It really does become the interchain as all these people start adopting these things.
Yeah,
sort of
from
the
a
super chain
technical
for everything is where IBC can take us, is kind of the way I think about it.
Ooh, I like that new slogan. That makes sense to me. It resonates. From like a functional technical standpoint, if the hub is going to become the super chain for Ethereum L2s and L3s, and what other and maybe even like Bitcoin L2s, if the future entails that. Technically, how do you do that in terms of infrastructure? Because Ethereum, I believe, has a lot of like prover networks and like solver networks. They have their own infrastructure, idiosyncratic ones. So how do we reconcile all the different ones and aggregate over even those ecosystems?
A lot of it kind of fundamentally comes down to how is IBC, and especially this new version of IBC, different from any other kind of fundamental layer that people are building on top of, which is, in the process of building SkipGo, we've used and integrated with every bridge out there from like CCTP to Layer 0 to Axelar to Hyperlink. We're familiar with everything, and the IBC has a few things that make it really unique. The first and the most important is that it's permissionless, right? So anybody can help to scale the IBC network by integrating their own whatever bespoke kind of thing that they have, whether it's a bespoke VM or an app chain or a new kind of security deployment. Like the guidelines exist, and there's no one that can stop them. And then the second thing, and that's not true of really any other bridge except for Hyperlink, so it can expand much, much faster. And then the second thing is this new version of IBC is much cheaper and easier to implement. So in the past, all of this has always been true, but it was 100 times more complex to do than could really be done by many people. Now it's much more accessible. We kind of haven't finished finalizing the standard yet, but the IBC team is doing incredibly good work to make it much, much simpler. And this kind of brings us to the last thing, which is without sacrificing expressivity. So the other thing that makes IBC really incredible is it's much more expressive and feature rich than any other kind of interop platform that exists, which means that rather than just saying, oh, okay, like chain abstraction, or I can connect here and here, I can send tokens between here, we can build real multi-chain applications and protocols on top of things like ACKs and timeouts and ICAs and ICQs and like all this technical stuff. And like what we're going to be doing at the developer level is building toolkits that abstract that and make that really, really seamless, like we've done with SkipGo. And at the application level, we're going to be delivering apps that show, oh, you can build much better stuff if you actually can interact with all of crypto. So better consumer-facing applications become unlocked by all of this. And that's a big part of what we need to really drive people in.
Oh, that's powerful. So basically you're building a toolkit, or almost like, I don't know if this is like the technically correct metaphor, but like an API that you could export to a bunch of different people, that developers that decide to plug into this aggregating layer to then build their application in a sort of permissionless way. And that's how it's going to scale.
This is sort of where the Cosmos Hub was called a hub for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It was supposed to be this. And it can be this, right?
Yeah.
It's an interoperability hub. It is the the Venice of the shipping lanes of the 1600s, right? It's all the city states around it sort of have this one place where they can interoperate, and everything is solved at the fringes for them, so that the idea is you have one IBC connection to the hub and you are connected seamlessly to everything else in crypto. And ideally, not everything else just in crypto, but also to Web 2, right? And the traditional internet at some point, right? That we can aggregate even connections into, the most popular Web 2 applications and APIs and, torrent networks and things like that. That all you need is one IBC connection to the hub, and then you have all of that at your fingertips as a developer that you can import and export seamlessly.
Totally. That's awesome. This is I'm super excited. Make Adam great again. The entire ecosystem really needs another sort of like Luna bull run again, right? It was more like the entire ecosystem lifted as a result of how much liquidity the Luna ecosystem was pulling in. And in this cycle, if that could be the Cosmos Hub, then that would be fantastic. Are there plans to draw in liquidity, like more liquidity into the ecosystem? Or are we still in the building the infrastructure phase?
There are definitely plans. I don't know if you read through sort of our the different documents around the acquisition, but our North Star is actually liquidity based. So we want to 100x the liquidity within Cosmos, which is a significant increase. It would basically put us on par or closer to on par with like Solana, for example. And in order
is that liquidity on par with how much Luna had brought in 2021?
So Luna brought in roughly like $30 billion of liquidity. I haven't checked the most recent liquidity numbers in Cosmos, but I assume it's closer like to 1 to 2 billion. I don't exactly know how much liquidity Solana has right now, but yes, it would be like we would like there to be an as liquid ecosystem as when Terra was around, with proper economics and not Ponzonomics. I don't think interoperability itself will do this, right? There needs to be a draw for people to attract liquidity into the ecosystem. And so that sort of brings us to our other set of strategies around attracting builders and around finding and experimenting with different core use cases and core products that we can build that will attract that kind of liquidity. This, I would say, is where all of our ideas seem to be constrained by the lack of infrastructure, which is surprising, because oftentimes it is the reverse. But for example, for us to have something like a truly decentralized stablecoin with high yield, we need to be able to access yields everywhere in crypto, right? Or we need to be able to access protocols everywhere in crypto seamlessly and safely. We don't have that infrastructure from the Cosmos Hub right now. And so we have a lot of ideas of what to build on top of this interop system we're talking about, which we've internally been calling Highway. Our hope is that we can build some of these out as soon as it's ready.
There's a lot of different projects trying to solve the same things, albeit not necessarily in alignment with the Cosmos Hub, just because of the nature of how disorganized it used to be. So, Mitosis is solving the same thing, and they're in the Cosmos ecosystem. If there were a way to scale this up in such a way as to incentivize projects like Mitosis to, not build their own chain or whatever, and like instead build on the hub and offer the service, so that scales up the BD to like a whole project. And similarly, Polymer is trying to do the same thing with like expanding IBC to other ecosystems. So if there were, again, a way to like socially collaborate with external projects in a complementary way rather than competitive zero-sum way, I think that would help us to scale up the efforts that's needed to get to the vision, the end goal.
100%.
Yeah.
One of the big, just very kind of practical boots on the ground way that we're starting to collaborate with folks is really pushing IBC as not just a Cosmos thing or a thing that connects the hub to other places, but really pushing it as a neutral industry-wide solution for cross-chain messaging. It's much more expressive, much more flexible than anything else that exists. It has all of the properties that we care about: open source, permissionless, and really importantly, is already kind of the interop solution within Cosmos. It's what Celestia is adopting under the hood for lazy bridging. It's what is powering Initia and Dimension. And, as other things are turning into these multi-chain ecosystems, like a huge area that we can collaborate on with them, whether they're, trying to compete with everything that Cosmos is doing or not, is saying, hey, look, like here is this neutral standard that is widely adopted everywhere that you can give your developers access to for the same reason that we want to give people access to, which is to say that then they can connect beyond the boundaries of any one ecosystem, and they can build better things, we can build better things. And it's a thing that's, we're chatting the optimism folks about it, we're chatting the Arbitrum folks about it. Like, I think there's a lot of industry excitement around it. It's the first time anything like that is really becoming possible because of this new version of IBC2. So it's something people have been talking about for years, but it was never really feasible because they'd like go and then you realize, oh, hey, I actually have to like build an entirely new massive venture-backed company to like try to expand to this one other ecosystem. And now it's like two people can get together and like implement IBC for a new ecosystem in like a week or 2 weeks. And we're, kind of actively sourcing grants for people to do that. So it's a huge kind of expansion of the platform that Cosmos is already built on and that the hub is already built on. And as we start to build the infrastructure out around the hub that makes it a really, really powerful, useful node in that network, it's going to become a super obvious place for developers to go or for app chains to connect to.
Exactly. There's this value prop emerging from the hub that you guys are building that's going to make it higher EV to just build and directly inherit the properties of the hub than it would be to create an alternative platform where like you have to incur a whole bunch of overhead up front just to get to where you need to be instead of focusing on the application. So now we're kind of
I was going to say those are actually the exact properties of a good platform, right?
Right.
That by using the platform, it should be a positive value thing, right? So by launching your line of small or handmade clothing on eBay and Etsy, you're significantly better off than if you were to, let's say, completely go out on your own or try to sell it on the street.
Yeah.
Right. And that is what the hub should be, right? And that's necessary for successful applications. It should be something that by using it as a platform, a developer platform, have access to everything, every market. You also have access to all of the users, and any user can come and seamlessly use your application, no matter where they come from. You have access even to potentially Web 2 distribution, right? So distribution to Twitter, to Telegram, to social media, and you do everything that you can to basically help lift up developers so that they are 10 steps ahead of everyone else who does not use the hub. And then you charge a fraction of that value, right? So it's a massive gain for developers to come to Cosmos, and it becomes the absolute best place to build, not just Web3 applications, but any application. Because ultimately, why are we doing this, right? Why are we even building here? Like, why are we trying to make Cosmos so great? I think the reality is because we view this as a way to build all applications in the future, not just your marginal DeFi application. We're talking about, massive scale social media. We're talking about massive financial institutions. We're talking about, just huge communication networks. All of these things are going to need sovereign infrastructure, and Cosmos is the only thing that can provide it. And we're going to make that happen, right, over the next 4 years. And that's really our goal here.
Wow, excellent. The next 4 years. Amazing.
We're going to try, yeah.
Let's do it.
Where we're going to be this time next year is going to be the hub is finally a hub, and it's a central point in the IBC ecosystem, and the IBC ecosystem is much, much bigger, and there's starting to be the first like breakout consumer applications built on the hub that are taking advantage of that multi-chain platform. But yeah, where we want to be in a couple of years or 4 years is that the biggest companies and protocols in the world are building in the Cosmos ecosystem, which is where we always should have been. like really and truly. It's like very obvious to us. And so we just have to, buckle down and do the things to make it happen and put in the work.
My thesis about the future is that the crypto natives are going to exclusively focus on the infrastructure that they're good at, as in like the blockchain infrastructure, and extend that more as a service, like blockchain as a service to enterprise clients or consumer application clients for whatever application that they're in, like real estate or power grids, stuff like that, right? It's not going to be the crypto natives that are going to be solving the higher level consumer apps, but it's going to be like we're going to be providing this as a service. And I think a lot of other ecosystems have realized this as well. I see Avalanche starting to do that, right? They're like doing like blockchain as a service sort of things.
Yeah.
So are in terms of like TPS, because apparently that's what people care about. Is the hub on existing Tendermint infrastructure going to be able to keep up or outpace blockchains like Monad and Solana, I guess? I mean, Solana is sort of like artificially sped up. Are we going to be able to keep pace with even those
100%.
the ones?
Yes, but also the hub doesn't need to be like Cosmos is infinitely scalable, right?
Right.
And that's what I don't think a lot of folks understand, right? Solana is not infinitely scalable. Solana has a TPS number. Cosmos does not have a TPS number, nor does it need one, because the best applications can build their entire own blockchain, right? With as much TPS as they'd like, and it horizontally scales. And so the Cosmos Hub does not need to compete on a TPS framework. But that said, if we want it to be a routing hub for a lot of interoperability, we will massively increase the TPS, and we're already working on that, actually.
The hub, to really kind of become a great multi-chain developer platform, needs to have extremely fast block times and needs to be able to support a large scale of transactions. We're not trying to like process all of the world's state and execute all of the world's transactions on the hub like Solana is. We don't actually think that that's possible. Like, we think that leads to really bad incentives for builders over time, like you're seeing with Ethereum. We need the Cosmos ecosystem, and we honestly want anything that connects to the hub to feel like it's seamlessly a part of all of the other app chains that connect to the hub. You should not even have really a realization that you're potentially bridging between them or moving assets between them, at the front end level, at the wallet level, and at the level of how long that's going to take. So our number one priority on Comet is massively reducing block times. And there's a bunch of good work that Celestia and Osmosis and the Informal team have done, but hasn't really been like prioritized pushing upstream that we can do to bring block times down. And then I think that's actually a really kind of helpful framework for how we're thinking about things now, which is that rather than just working on whatever on the individual components of the stack, we're working backwards from what do we need for the hub to become an incredible platform for people to build these kinds of applications and for people to build app chains that really benefit from connecting to the hub. And then we're prioritizing those things at the top of the stack. And that's a huge shift in how we do development. It's very, very focused now.
Any housekeeping items and last notes that you guys want to end on?
I would say if you're in Cosmos and you're watching this, we want to have a relationship with you, especially if you're building something. You should reach out to us. You can always DM me. If you're not currently working on something that you're excited about, talk to me and we can get you working on something that you are excited about. If you are interested in building a chain, you can also chat to us. We can be very helpful in that regard and get you set up in a way that is part of this new vision for Cosmos. If you are not in Cosmos and you're watching this, the question to ask yourselves is, do you believe that there will be an internet of blockchains? Because ultimately, Cosmos is the internet of blockchains. And if you believe that there will be many blockchains and you believe that it will scale in that way, we're building that. There's many different ways to get started and to be along for the ride. And we're also happy to help you get set up either building or just being in the ecosystem.
With that, let's make Cosmos great again. See you guys.